feel like we can run the table. I really do.
Giants looking for a stop. They're going to air it out. Rodgers does this better than anybody. End zone, Cobb, touchdown! Unbelievable! This to send the Packers into the NFC Championship game. It is good! The Packers are moving on. Aaron Rodgers has done it again.
Grassy Posse Packer Nation, welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you're not to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I am your host, Tom Grassi, and got a little bit of a different episode this week. And while many of you were expecting for me to interview a Bears fan, I felt that for 3 years I've talked to Bears fans, and I feel like this was a little bit more important as the voices have gotten louder. And I'm not talking about the ones that are in my head, but the voices shouting for the termination of Dom Capers. Now, one could argue that these voices have been there since 2011, in which our defense started to look not like our Super Bowl run. And I feel like every year since then, it's been exacerbated by early playoff exits, blowing it in the NFC Championship game in Seattle, blowing it last year in the NFC Championship game in Atlanta, and obviously it's coming to a head again this year, especially without Aaron Rodgers to really support the team. And so what I thought was important, what I wanted to do, is I wanted to take a comprehensive look at Dom Capers' tenure in Green Bay. I wanted to look at the defensive stats. I wanted to look at draft picks and finally solve this once and for all. I've defended Dom Capers in the past, and I have blamed it on player performance and their inability to produce. I've blamed it on McCarthy. I've blamed it on the offense being stagnant, and I've also blamed it on Capers at least a little bit. But now I think as time has progressed, I think the conclusion that I'm going to reach at the end of this, and what you may reach as well, is that it's finally time to get rid of Dom, and I'm going to explain why. So Dom Capers has been with the Green Bay Packers for 9 years. He's had an illustrious career before that, but for this video alone, I'm going to be focusing on the 2009 season and up. As the 2009 season was his first season with the Green Bay Packers. It was also when Aaron Rodgers was really starting to get into it. Obviously, he came into the league in 2005, but didn't play for 4 years because he was under Brett Favre. The Green Bay Packers really hype up Dom Capers in their bio. And this is evident as they just present the good things. And so this is what the Green Bay Packers website says about Dom Capers. That since Dom Capers has been the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator, Green Bay has been number 1 in interceptions with 165. They've been number 4 in total takeaways with 229. They've been number 5 in opponent passer rating with 81. They've been number 3 in sacks with 328. And they've been number 8 in points per game with 21.2. And when you look at those stats, obviously it's pretty impressive. You're looking at it and you're saying, listen, we are top 10 in every single one of those categories. Obviously, our defense is doing pretty darn well. But if we take a little bit of a closer look, that will actually prove to be the complete opposite. 2009, when Dom Capers became the defensive coordinator, we were number 7 in points allowed and number 2 in yards allowed. Truly a good defense. This would be one of the times in which I would argue we were one of the best. But the best that our defense had ever been was 2010, which is obviously our Super Bowl year. We were number 2 in points allowed and number 5 in yards allowed. The Packers' defense has always been associated with the bend, don't break mentality. And under the first 2 years with Dom Capers, I would argue that is 100% the case. In that You have a dominant defense. We're leading the league in turnovers. We're also very close to the top with points allowed and yards allowed. And so when these two things are combined, you have a defense that is consistently stopping. It's not the bend, don't break model. It's literally the we're not bending model, in that we are in the top 5 in both of those categories. In 2011, that starts to drop off. 2011, of course, you'll remember as the 15-1 season in which Aaron Rodgers was playing phenomenally. The offense was clicking on, firing on all cylinders. The defense was just there. Obviously, we exited the divisional round against the Giants because the defense couldn't do anything. But let's talk about those standings. In 2011, they were 19 in points allowed and number 32 in yards allowed. 32. We were the worst in the league in yards allowed and 19 in points allowed. That is the bend, don't break model, but even then, I would say we're bending and breaking under that. So a big drop off from 2010 to 2011. In 2012, we were 11 in points allowed and 11 in yards allowed. A little bit better, almost top 10. 2012, we had a little bit better of a defense. 2013, we were number 24 in points allowed and 25 in yards allowed. Again, not a great defense. 2014, number 13 in points allowed and number 15 in yards allowed, arguably much better. 2015, 12 in points allowed and 15 in yards allowed. And obviously 2016, last year, we were 21 in points allowed and 22 in yards allowed. So these are not the greatest numbers. In the past 4 years, Capers has had the worst numbers of his career, especially in 2013 being 24 and 25, and then last year being 21 and 22, not getting better. Now, it gets consistently worse when you start talking about red zone efficiency. So this ranking is allowing the opponent to score when they are in the red zone. And in 2010, we were ranked 15. We were doing pretty darn good. 2011, we were 18, and 2015, we were 13. Every other year before that, we are 20, 25, 28. We are not in the top 20 when it comes to red zone. So that means that we are not only allowing the team to get into the red zone, we're allowing them to score when they get there. Again, dismissing the bend, don't break model, we're breaking here. Now, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about defensive players, because your schemes can be amazing, your game plans can be amazing, but without the players, it really doesn't mean a whole lot. Since 2009, and I'm not counting this year because we don't know how this year is going to pan out. Kevin King does look pretty good, but we don't know how that's going to pan out. When it comes to defenses, there are only 2009, there are only 13 defensive players from 2009 to 2016 that have remained on this team. That's it. We've obviously drafted first rounders like Dayton Jones in 2013. We've drafted people that are stuck around. There have been free agents. They've gone to the Detroit Lions. They've gone to the Tennessee Titans. Those 13 people, you got Morgan Burnett, Devon House, Nick Perry, Mike Daniels, Dimitri Goodson, Clinton Dix, Randall, Rollins, Jake Ryan, Dean Lowry, Blake Martinez. You also have Clay Matthews, of course, and you have Kenny Clark. Those are the 13. So in 9 years, not including this year, we have only kept 13 of our drafted defenders on the team. That's pretty terrible. And so I think you need to look at a couple of things. One, we did have a series of bad drafts. We had good drafts, don't get me wrong, but we had a series of bad drafts, especially when it comes to defensive players. For me, personally, Dayton Jones really sticks out for that. He was a first rounder in 2013 and obviously didn't pan out in any way, shape, or form. Drafting is never a guarantee, but Ted Thompson is consistently regarded as one of the best scouts, one of the best drafters in the NFL. And for you to only keep 13 players on the team in a span of 8 years, doesn't really look too good for the defense. And so this goes to the point of accountability. Who do we blame for this? Do we blame Capers for his inability to put together an elite defense, for constantly blitzing, for constantly breaking and bending? They haven't had an elite defense since 2010? Or do you put some of the blame on Ted Thompson and his inability to draft good defensive players? Kevin King looks like he's going to be a great player. Wonderful. Clay Matthews, obviously a great player. Morgan Burnett, great player. Daniels, Perry, etc. The list goes. Clayton Dix, the list goes on. But then you start looking at Randall and Rollins. Look at Randall. He's a first-round draft pick. Not really panning out so great. He's getting burned every week. He's getting benched. Rollins, not really living up to the hype either. Second-round draft pick. And so, when you're looking at who to blame here, I think with the amount of talent we've had on the team, it's unacceptable that our numbers last year are 21 in points allowed and 22 in yards allowed. I think it's unacceptable that the last time we were in the top 10 in both of points allowed and yards allowed was 8 years ago. That's a problem. I think that Aaron Rodgers has masked the problems of this team consistently, that he has put the entire team on his back, that we have been so focused on the offense that the defense is almost irrelevant because we're putting up so many points. 2011, we're number 32 in yards allowed. We're number 19 in points allowed. We go 15-1. No one really starts talking about the defense until we lose that game against the Chiefs, and then obviously against the Giants in the divisional game. And so now, with Aaron Rodgers gone, he's sidelined for this year. You don't have anybody else to blame. You can blame the inefficiency of the offense, and obviously Brett Hundley's not playing that well. Obviously Mike McCarthy's not calling the plays that well. We're barely putting up 17 points against the Detroit Lions. But at the same time, there's nowhere to hide anymore. You look at these numbers, we haven't been in the top 10 in either category since 2010. That's 8 years of, you could argue, mediocrity. 2012, 11-11. Better. 2014, 13-15. A little bit better. 2015, 12-15. But in the last 4 years, we haven't been in the top 20 in either category. There's 32 teams in the NFL, and we're in the bottom portion of that. That's a problem. The defense doesn't look like it's getting any better. Now, when you come to talking about blown games and how many blown opportunities we've had, you can blame the conservative play calling. You can blame a lot of things. But when it comes down to it, the thing that sticks out to me the most is how much the defense has squandered our playoff opportunities. You have the 2014 NFC Championship game against Seattle. You have the 2016 NFC Championship game against Atlanta. You have the game against the Cardinals, in which we lose like the first drive in overtime because our defense doesn't know how to tackle and can't cover Larry Fitzgerald. You have multiple occasions. You have the 49ers wild card game in 2012, or is 2013. I don't remember at this point. But we blew that game too. I'm sorry. 2012, when they scored 45 points on us and Colin Kaepernick ran all over us. And 2013, when we couldn't hold them and we lost in the wild card at home to 49ers. Dom Capers needs to be held accountable at this point. The stats on the Packers website make him look really good. We could be number 1 in interceptions, but guess what? When you're number 21 and 22 in points allowed and yards allowed, it really doesn't matter how many times you're picking off the ball. Because obviously the amount of turnovers isn't translating to success. It's not translating to wins. And so, while I can't put the full blame on him, I think that we've had a series of bad drafts when it comes to defensive players. Ultimately, this falls on Don Capers. He's a great coach, but he hasn't had an elite defense in 8 years. And at some point, you got to call him out on it. And I know that a lot of people, a lot of fans have been doing that for quite some time. And a lot of people have also been cutting him some slack because we've been making the playoffs consistently. But it's not because of the defense. It's because of Aaron Rodgers and that offense. If Aaron Rodgers, if we don't, we're not going to make the playoffs this year. There's no, and not to be a Debbie Downer, there's nothing that's giving me hope right now that says that we could go and beat the Chicago Bears. We can go and beat the Cleveland Browns. There's nothing that's telling me that we could do that. That's because we have a stagnant offense right now, and we also don't have a defense. And so while the emphasis over the past 8 years, you could argue, has been on the defense because that's what we keep on consistently drafting, you don't see the results. You see guys like Micah Hyde go to Buffalo and start to prosper, start to flourish. You see guys like Casey Hayward go to San Diego and become all-stars. Now, obviously, it's different teams, it's different divisions, different conferences, what have you. But at what point do you blame the defensive coordinator for not being put in the right spots? Dom Capers needs to go. And my concern is that after this year, with Aaron Rodgers being injured and we don't make the playoffs, that's going to be the excuse. Well, we didn't have Aaron Rodgers. That's why we didn't make the playoffs. We haven't been back to the Super Bowl in 8 years. There's a reason for that. And I would argue that the 99% of the time, it ain't because of the offense. It's because of the defense. We almost blew it against the Cowboys last year in the divisional game. We had a great lead, and we blew it. It's Dom Capers. He needs to go. And while our turnover rate might go down, we might not be number one anymore in 9 years, it's obviously not leading to success. I'd rather be in the bottom half of turnovers if we're winning games. And so with that being said, I am now officially on the we need to fire Dom Capers train. And considering we'll wait and see how the rest of this year pans out, there might be some others that need to go as well. I think McCarthy's fine. I think that Aaron Rodgers has covered up a lot of his flaws, but I think he's a good coach. People have been talking about Ted Thompson going. Maybe that's a potential too. But if there's one person that I think needs to not be in Green Bay anymore this season, it's Dom Capers. That's what I have to say about that. I'm curious to what you think. Let me know. And let's hope something changes after this year. You could always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com. That's TomGrossi Comedy, or Tom Grossi Comedy on the Twitters. Check out Packcast, Packast. We're here 2 times a week, and also with our predictions episode on Saturdays. Next week, we will going back, and we will be having fans on this show. I just feel like I really needed to make this long episode and talk about this. Thank you so much for watching. It's Packcast. Again, check it out everywhere. And hang in there, Packer fans. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.